Chapter 24. Tears trickled down my face as I looked at myself in the full-length mirror, dressed in the regal wedding dress that was never meant to belong to me. I hadn't been made into a princess. I was a traitor in a costume. Nothing more. "Most brides smile on their wedding day," Gerda teased, giving my elbow a slight jiggle. "I hope those are happy tears." I managed a watery smile, but feared that any speech would exit as a croak. Already a lump had formed in my throat that was impossible to swallow away. I took several deep breaths, trying to steady myself and prevent a full breakdown. "I know it's sad that your father wasn't here for this," she went on, bending down to fix my train and handing me my bouquet of pure white roses as she straightened. "But Prince Korth is a lucky man." How wrong she was. Korth was the least lucky man in the world. Each time I thought of him, I was seized with guilt so acute that I feared I would be eaten alive from the inside out from the shame of it all. Korth deserved someone who wouldn't use him as I had done. He deserved someone who would love him without reservation, the way he had so freely loved me. If I went through with it... Korth's face appeared in my mind, kneeling across an altar as a priest joined us in matrimony. I had my vows planned out, the few words I managed to string together that I would be able to say that weren't complete lies. The moment I tried to think of what vows he would give, I was hit with the realization that he would be making those vows to Princess Odette, not to me. Even if we both signed our marriage license, our union would never be real because I wasn't Princess Odette. I was an imposter, and Korth deserved better. "I want to see Korth," I announced suddenly. "Right now." "But it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride on—" "I don't care. It would be worse than any amount of bad luck if I married Korth under a false pretense. He would be devastated when I finally revealed that our entire relationship had been a lie. But at least that way, I could do one thing honorably. Curdy and the other members of the rebellion would be furious, but I couldn't continue the façade any longer. The ships had been sent. It was better to turn myself in than marry Korth and force him into marriage with the likes of me. The truth would be revealed eventually. It was better to do it now than after our wedding. I dropped my bouquet, gathered my skirts, and strode purposefully toward the door. "But, my lady!" Gerda scurried after me, trying to lift my train so it wouldn't pick up dirt. "Please wait!" I didn't wait. I ran through corridors and down winding staircases until I came to Korth's door, breathless and windswept from the run. A few strands had come loose from my hairdo and hung in front of my face and over my ears. The guards on either side of the door froze as I lifted my fist and pounded on the door. "Korth!" I shouted, still winded from my run. "I need to talk to you!" My lady!" Gerda panted. She caught up to me, clutching a stitch in her side and gasping for breath. "It's tradition for the bride." "I'm aware of the tradition, Gerda, but this is too important." I turned back to the door. "Korth!" The door opened. Korth stood there, dressed in a suit of pure white trimmed with gold buttons and sewn with golden thread. His hair was perfectly combed, he was clean-shaven, and I could immediately smell that he had bathed using fragrant soaps. He looked every inch a groom. His mouth hung open. "You look beautiful, Odette." It was the use of the false name that was my ultimate undoing. "I need to talk to you, now. And privately." "I told her about our tradition, Your Highness," Gerda panted, still holding her hand to her side. "She wouldn't listen." "What my bride wants is more important than any tradition. Come in," Korth said graciously, sweeping his hand to invite me to enter. Godfrey, ever at hand, made to follow, but Korth held up his hand. "She said privately." "But you need a chaperone!" Godfrey looked appalled. "I'm sure a few minutes alone won't make much difference in the grand scheme of things when we'll be married today anyway," Korth said politely.
If you stay outside the door, we will finish our conversation quickly, and I promise to sit on my hands."
The door clicked shut, and Korth turned to stare at me, his eyes soft.
"You really do look stunning."
"I need to tell you something," I said, keeping my eyes downcast. "Before we get married, if you still want to marry me—"
"Of course I want to marry you,"
Korth interrupted.
"We've been planning our entire lives to get married, and these past weeks have only reinforced just how much I've come to love you."
I held up my hand to stem his speech before he went any farther. "Wait until you hear what I have to say." Korth clamped his mouth shut and sat on the cedar chest at the foot of his bed. True to his word to Godfrey, he tucked his hands beneath him. I paced up and down the room, crossing from the wall panel that hid the dumbwaiter all the way to the window that boasted an open view of the ocean, and back again. "I haven't been totally honest with you," I confessed, but then fumbled for where to begin.
"Start with what you've told me that is true, then,"
Korth prompted gently.
"We can work through the other things together."
The lump in my throat shrank slightly. "It was true when I told you about how there are many injustices in my kingdom," I began. "I want that to change in Ibora. There are far too many traders participating in black market dealings or committing acts of piracy. Ibora has a lot to improve in terms of legal action."
"We can sort that out,"
Korth offered, his brow nodded in concern.
"We can draft new laws, and—"
"Our kingdom really is on the brink of a civil war, and it will break out any day, if it hasn't already."
"I know. I sent the ships to help."
I bit my lip. He was trying so hard to understand why I was upset. "I'm not who you think I am," I whispered. "I'm not an honorable person."
"Don't say that,"
Korth interjected, rising from the chest and taking my hands in his.
"You are the best person I know. You've helped me be a better man. You challenged my beliefs about myself and the world, and you are exactly what my kingdom, and yours, I'm sure, needs. Our people need a leader who cares about them, and you do. Why else would you be wanting to change these laws instead of keeping things the way they are?"
He folded his arms around me, and I allowed my head to rest against his chest. Could I allow myself one last moment of happiness before I destroyed my entire future? "Korth, you are very generous with your compliments," but the door was flung open. There, her hair disheveled and a wild expression on her face, was the true Princess Odette. She pointed a finger dramatically at me.
"Guards! Arrest that woman! She's an imposter!"
Korth stepped defensively in front of me.
"How dare you accuse the princess? Get out!"
The guards closed their hands over her upper arms, prepared to drag her out. She wrenched at their arms, trying to break free. Her hair, which I was accustomed to always seeing neatly styled and combed back, had come loose and fell in her face. She looked unhinged.
"She's lying! I'm the true Princess Odette! I have a witness!"
"Who?"
Korth demanded, still shielding me from Odette. She pivoted to beckon to her accomplice, and in came Curdy. "You?" I couldn't suppress my gasp.
"You!"
Korth took an aggressive step toward him.
"I told you never to come near my fiancé again."
"I'm simply here to ensure that the real princess isn't replaced by an imposter." Korth turned to stare at me, bewildered.
"Who are these people? What are they talking about?"
I could have lied. I could have had them both thrown in prison and clung to the title I'd claimed as my own. But I was done living a life of lies. Korth deserved to know the truth, and he deserved to know who he was about to marry. "I really need to speak with you," I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. "Please, Korth."
"It's true!"
Odette shrieked, stamping her foot on the ground and still attempting to break free from the guards. Curdy leaned against the doorframe, an expression of smug satisfaction on his face.
Go on and tell him. Tell him how you caused a mutiny and marooned the loyal soldiers on the way here so you could take Odette's place.
He redirected his attention to Korth.
She organized a coup and planned to have the reinforcements you sent aid her rebellion and oust the true king of Ibora and replace him with an imposter, just like her. Tell him, Dahlia.
Dahlia? Korth took a step back from me. The pain in his eyes tore at my soul.
You've used that name before.
Korth, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it.
So it's true?
Korth looked so hurt and betrayed that I wanted to shrivel up and disappear.
All this time, you've just been using me?
She was trying to keep us from being together,
Odette cooed. She had stopped trying to break free from the guards and batted her lashes. Korth looked from me to everyone else in the room, then back again.
Tell me it isn't true,
he whispered to me, his voice brittle.
Tell me it isn't true, and I'll believe you, Odette.
My chin quivered. My name is Dahlia. What they said is true. Korth recoiled in horror. The guards released Odette, who hurried to Korth's side. He feebly pushed her hands away, but she persisted, fawning over him and easing him into a chair. I know I lied, I said in a rush, but it was the only way. Odette and her father are tyrants and—
Guards!
Odette snapped, her haughty voice cutting through the air with authority.
Take the imposter away and lock her up!
Both guards hesitated, looking at Korth for confirmation. Korth, please. I can explain, I begged.
Didn't you hear me?
Odette squawked at the guards.
Take her to the dungeon! She was planning to overthrow the true royal Iborian family, me and my father.
Your Highness?
The bearded guard asked hesitantly. Korth refused to look at me.
Take her away,
he breathed.
Take them all away.
But I didn't do anything. I'm the victim here,
Odette screeched.
Get your hands off me!
Curdy let out similar shouts of protest, but he was no match for the guards who hauled us away. My last fleeting glimpse of Korth was of him sitting on the trunk at the foot of his bed again, elbows on his knees, while one hand clutched at his hair and the other dropped the thin wedding band he had intended to give me to the floor. It seemed that, despite his previous assertions, his love did have conditions, after all. Chapter 25. The dark dungeon cell I was thrown into reeked of mildew, creating a pressing atmosphere of despair and isolation. Even though it was better maintained than the dungeons back in Ibora, it was still a dungeon nonetheless. Mice scurried through the thin layer of straw littering the floor, and only by drawing my feet up onto the wooden planks that served as a rudimentary bunk was I able to prevent them touching me. Had I just made the worst mistake of my life? Korth valued honesty and integrity above all else, and now that he knew what I'd done, he would undoubtedly call back the troops he'd deployed. How long would it take for his missive to reach Ibora? Would the rebellion have already been carried out? Would a new regiment of soldiers be deployed to reinstate Raquel? Or had he perished in the attack, and now Odette would be queen? What would that mean if Korth had locked Ibora's princess or queen in the dungeon? How long would it be before we were all questioned? Questions chased themselves around in my head. But soon, not even my clamoring thoughts could drown out Odette's shrieks. I threw a disgusted look across the walkway to where Odette's cell was located directly opposite of mine. She hadn't ceased her verbal tirades since being dragged away from Korth, an impressive feat considering the hours we'd been down here alone. In the first 10 minutes, I'd found myself envying Korth's deaf cousin, Treva. Curdy sat moodily in a cell beside Odette, hands clamped over his ears and staring at Odette in the same way I imagined a viper would look at its prey moments before striking. I jammed my fingers into my ears as I frantically paced inside my cell, beating a circular track into the hardened dirt that coated the stone floor after the straw was pushed out of the way. I was imprisoned, but so were Odette and Kurdy. What would the others in the rebellion do once word reached Deborah? Would they try to rescue me? Flee? Their testimony when I was put on trial? Surely they had proven their loyalty to me. But I'd thought that before. I threw a dirty look at Kurdy. He had been part of the rebellion too, the traitor. He sat with his hands still clamped over his ears in his cell, glaring back at me any time our eyes met. Not long after we had been imprisoned, Garrick had been escorted past us to another cell around the corner, even though there was an empty cell next to me. As he passed, Garrick merely shrugged and smiled as he chuckled,
Well, we tried our best.
For hours, Odette continued to shout.
This is unacceptable. I insist on speaking with the captain of the guard at once. Bring Prince Korth immediately. I've been wrongly imprisoned. I've done nothing wrong.
What would happen once someone with authority came? Korth would want to see justice served. His integrity would allow for nothing else. But that was where doubt entered my mind. While I didn't have reservations that he would want to do what was right, I did have misgivings about what he would consider to be right. If he'd overseen Peter Pan's trial, the boy would have been executed. I ran a hand across my throat, imagining a scratchy noose tightening around it. True, I had led a mutiny against royalty, but it had only been on behalf of the people who were too oppressed to fight for themselves. Korth would see that, wouldn't he? I held out hope. Just because there was a setback didn't mean that the game was over yet. I could still salvage this, even though Kurdy had sold me out and switched sides. If I could just talk to Korth, we would be able to work it out. Odette's voice finally started to die. Her shouts had gone unnoticed by the guards, wherever they were, and it seemed that she finally fizzled out and sat, pouting with her head leaned back against the wall. Kurdy took advantage of her dwindling voice and leaned against the cell bars, watching me closely.
You were never going to go through with the plan, were you?
My plan was always to help the people of Deborah, I snapped at him. She certainly won't.
That doesn't answer my question.
I did go through with the plan, nitwit. Did you miss where I got 2 regiments deployed?
Yeah, I did. Because you assigned me to watch the real princess while you were off swapping spit with Prince Stuffed Shirt.
I shook my head and wished I were close enough to slap Kurdy again. I should have recognized the danger in Kurdy's flirtations earlier instead of dismissing them. No matter how many times I tried to distract myself with thoughts of the rebellion, the tormented expression on Korth's face continued to fill my mind's eye. Bathing in acid would be preferable to enduring the horrific guilt that plagued me. Korth had trusted me, loved me even, and I had intentionally exploited him for my own gains. All of the raw shame I felt would be nothing compared to the shock and betrayal Korth was experiencing. All because of me. The elusive dreams of happiness that had danced just out of reach would never come to be. And I couldn't blame anyone but myself. Korth never should have endured any of this, but I was the villainess who had forced it upon him. I deserved whatever punishment came my way.
Dahlia?
Odette's voice croaked, barely audible through my stupor.
Forget her. She's too busy pining over the prince she's in love with.
Kurdy spat bitterly. Boiling rage turned my vision red. All of this could have been avoided if Kurdy had just kept his mouth shut. At least I did my part, I shouted, suddenly reinvigorated. You betrayed us all. And over what? Some stupid infatuation when I told you I was never interested?
No, it's because you've been power-hungry this whole time and were willing to share your bed with a prince who only cares about your name.
A scream of frustration tore at my throat. Is that what you think is going on? Korth is more honorable than you could ever be. That's why I fell in love with him and never with you. Now we're all stuck here, and it's all your fault. I can't believe I ever liked you, Curdy shouted back. Even if I'm in prison, at least you are too, and I'm glad of it. If the ships were already sent, there was no reason for you to marry him after you finished using him. Teeth grinding together, I crossed my arms and stared up at the tiny barred window above my wooden bunk, determined not to show any expression other than anger to Curdy. Though he sneered several more insults my way, I managed to ignore him by focusing on Korth. If we hadn't done anything, I would be married to him by now. How differently the day would have been. Now he was probably meeting with advisors and scrambling to bring back the ships sent to aid the rebellion. Would they make it in time? I had ruined everything. The rebellion would likely fail. I'd broken Korth's heart along with my own and had nothing to show for it.
I told you she would do anything to marry him,
Odette told Curdy, her voice still croaky after all her shouting.
It's her loss that she never liked you. She's missing out.
I snuck a glance their way. Odette had stopped trying to call the guards and was leaned against the bars between her and Curdy's cells, a fawning expression on her face. Yeah, Curdy grumbled. Too late for that now, though.
I can do more for you than she ever could,
Odette cooed.
Once I'm released, I'll make sure to reward you when I regain my throne.
I exhaled sharply through my nose. I'd been so fixated on charming Korth that I hadn't imagined Odette would try the same trick on Curdy. Perhaps she and I really were more alike than I ever cared to admit. The hours dragged by, occasionally punctuated by a snide comment from Odette or Curdy. As night fell, heavy footsteps approached. I looked up, daring to hope, and was disappointed. It was simply a guard.
Come on, you two,
he growled at Curdy and Odette.
Prince's orders. He wants to talk to you.
They scrambled to their feet while their cell doors were unlocked. Odette shot a smug look my way.
See, Dahlia, we are free to go because we are innocent. I'm sure he's planning to propose because I, unlike you, am a real princess.
I never said you were free to go,
the guard rumbled, snapping handcuffs onto her.
The prince just wants to talk to you.
Oh, he doesn't want to talk to her?
Odette's upper lip curled.
I wonder why.
As they made their way down the hall, I overheard Odette suggesting various punishments for someone who committed treason, the most colorful of which was being dragged in a barrel full of nails behind a team of white horses. I refused to react as they left, closed my eyes, and tried not to imagine what their conversation with Korth would be. There was no redemption for me after this. The sound of more footsteps echoed off the stone walls, accompanied by the jangling of many keys on a ring. Metallic scraping came from next to me outside the unoccupied cell. Then there was a grunt as someone was flung into it. Nice accommodations, the new prisoner said to the guards. He sounded young, but I was too numb to care. What did age matter in prison? The number of years someone had already lived made no difference when there were only a certain number of days until one died. A loud bang sounded. It might have made me jump if I hadn't felt so dead to the world around me. Ooh, so threatening to hit iron bars. Am I supposed to be scared? The young man taunted.
Do you need me to come in there and teach you a few lessons on manners?
The guard growled. I'd welcome it. My guess is that you're just blustering because you feel the need to intimidate others around you with your size, since there's nothing going on in that rotund head of yours.
Don't bother with him,
the other guard said.
He's a lunatic, that one is.
They all are,
the first guard growled. You have a good day, too, the prisoner shouted back. From around the corner, I heard Garrick laugh. I continued to stare at the ceiling and ignored the new prisoner in the cell next to me. I heard him pacing, but effortlessly tuned it out. Nothing mattered anymore. Chapter 26. Neither Curdy nor Odette returned to the prison. I had assumed they wouldn't, but it was nevertheless a blow to have stark evidence of the side Korth had taken. From the brief snippets of conversation I'd overheard from guards occasionally passing by, it sounded as though Korth planned to marry the true Princess Odette. I didn't doubt it. My only visitor was Gerda, who brought me a solitary dress for a change of clothing and wouldn't look me in the eye. I kept my undergarments and slip, but shoved the flowing wedding dress I had been wearing back through the bars to her. The pure white soiled to a dull gray color that matched my prison cell. As she gathered the fabric and retreated, I couldn't help watching the future I had dreamed of fade even faster than Gerda's profile did. The replacement dress she'd given me looked horribly familiar. It had been washed, but as I felt the scratchy cloth brush against my skin, the memory of handing this same dress to Odette on the voyage to Haven Harbor burst into the forefront of my mind's eye in full, vivid color. How perfectly fitting. Ignoring the droplets that splattered against my head from above, I huddled in a corner, arms wrapped around myself, as the cheerful sounds of wedding preparations filtered in from the barred windows. That wedding was never meant to be mine. I couldn't rid my mind of the conjured image of Korth holding hands with Odette as a minister pronounced them man and wife. I had failed. Simple as that. The risk had always been there, yawning its jaws as it stalked closer towards me. But I had naively and foolishly let myself fall for Korth and forget the danger. Now, I had not only failed the rebellion and all of my country, but I'd also lost the only man I'd ever loved. The ships would be recalled, and all I had to show for my months of effort was a broken heart. A quiet sob caught in my throat as I buried my eyes into my knees. Odette had won. The horrified expression on Korth's face when the truth had been revealed haunted me, continually cropping up at the forefront of my mind, no matter how firmly I tried to suppress it. "What you crying for?" the boy in the cell next to me asked. His light, carefree voice made it sound as though he was lounging on a beach while being fanned with palm fronds, not locked in a miserable, dank prison cell. "Because I am a deceitful, lying fraud," I answered, my voice ragged. "Aren't we all, though?" I raised my head to stare at him through my puffy, bloodshot eyes. The red-headed boy looked to be about 16 years old, but his eyes had a mischievous glint in them that hinted at decades of knowledge. "Are you one as well?" I asked waspishly. "Sure am. Everyone is, even if they pretend otherwise." He interlaced his fingers behind his head and reclined back against the wooden bench that served as his makeshift bed. "So what are you in for?" "Trying to start a war." "I presume you failed at that simple little task." I glared at the boy, wishing I could muster the energy to slap the knowing smirk off his face. "Such a simple little task is more difficult than you think, little boy." "I doubt it." "Enlighten me, then. How would a boy like yourself start a war?" "Easy. Instead of swapping places with the princess and letting her run free like you did, kill her on the voyage over, then set about pillaging every city you come across." I sneered. "You'd be dead on the first raid. Pirates aren't welcome here, and no ship can stand up to a fully armed city." He shook his head. "They wouldn't expect an attack from a ship running up Ibora's colors if they thought the princess was coming to marry Prince Korth. Strike swiftly at night, and they wouldn't have time to prepare an adequate defense. I would set a task force of men to do cosmetic damage to any ships in the harbor, while we attacked the armories usually kept near the beacon. Then set sail again. In and out within 20 minutes. I stared at my fellow prisoner with newfound respect. Even if it was twisted and warped, he deserved to be here just as much as I did. Why only cosmetic damage? He hopped off his bunk and shifted his weight onto one of his feet as he leaned casually against the bars. With enough damage to force them to delay for a day or two, you ensure that you have adequate time to disappear. But as long as you flew that flag during the attack, word of what Ibora did would spread very quickly. Haven Harbor would have been ready to go to war within a few weeks without you ever needing to marry the prince. And while Ibora's army was busy defending against Haven Harbor, your rebellion strikes when the king is weakest. He picked up a small stone from the bottom of his cell, threw it into the air, and caught it again. Your emotions were your downfall. This was no boy. He was a monster, a beast. I stared at him, suddenly glad for the bars that separated us as my mouth hung open. His plan was so brutally elegant. Why hadn't we thought of that? So why are you in here? He shrugged. Murder, kidnapping, imprisonment of pixies, theft. Take your pick. He spoke of it so casually that my stomach turned. At least with my crimes, I had remorse for how low I was forced to stoop. There was no guilt in this prisoner's voice. What's your name? The boy swept his dark green cap from his head and bowed low. Peter Pan's the name. Delighted to make your acquaintance. I must say, this beats the solitary confinement I've had until now. Peter Pan? That was the name of the prisoner whose trial Korth was supposed to attend when he decided to stay and help me instead. The one who should have been put to death, but Tess let off with life in prison instead. No matter. What did I care if I was placed alongside other people whose crimes were just as heinous as my own? Let me guess, Peter said, a smirk playing across his face. You fell for that hoity-toity prince, and your lies got found out. Am I right? I frowned. How would a prisoner like you know anything? I have my sources. He grinned. Sounds like you did quite a number on Mr. Perfect. My informant said that your handsome prince has been moaning and groaning and trying to convince himself that he was never in love with you. The boy closed his eyes and blew a puff of air up to flip the strands of red hair out of his face. How could this boy know anything about what Korth and I had been through if he had been locked in the cell next to me? I hadn't heard any informant come or go. How do you know about? I couldn't bring myself to say his name. What? How do I know about you and Korth? He snorted. Everyone knows. A wave of dread washed over me. No doubt Odette, once she had been let out, spread the story as far and wide as she could to gain sympathy. I could just imagine her self-righteous face now, fawning over Korth as she planned their wedding. The wedding that I still longed for. I hated the idea of her walking down the aisle. Would Korth smile for her the way he did for me? Would he continue our tradition of kissing on bridges with Odette? I scrunched my eyes shut, as if doing so would block out the images flashing through my mind at lightning speed. My life's mission had always been to overthrow my kingdom's rulers. I'd known that from the cradle. For a few short weeks, I had allowed myself the fleeting idea that perhaps my future could contain some vestige of happiness. What lies. People who were good and honorable like Korth deserved happy endings and bright futures. I deserved what I had, a damp jail cell to protect others from me. Peter tried to engage me in conversation several more times, but I ignored him. Everyone I'd ever known other than Korth was a liar or a criminal. There was no need for me to engage in conversation with someone even more unethical than myself.
Oi, you!
A burly guard with mutton chops had a pillow and a couple scratchy woolen blankets tucked under his arm.
Here.
He shoved them unceremoniously through the bars, so they fell to the floor. I sighed, then wearily rose and collected them. At least while I wasted away in prison, I'd have something to give my aching backside some reprieve from the hard slats of my wooden bunk. By the time I'd picked them up, the guard had disappeared. The scrape of wooden legs against a stone floor ground against my ears, tugging me from my sleep. I squinted in the dim light of the passageway and spotted Tess settling herself onto a stool outside Peter Pan's cell, 2 copies of a children's book in her hands. My eyes darted back and forth between Korth's little sister and the prisoner in the cell next to mine as I realized who Peter Pan's informant was. "Tess?" I asked cautiously. Her hands flew up to her mouth as she spotted me emerging from underneath the blankets.
Odette!
It's Dahlia, I supplied. The girl who might have been my sister hadn't even known my name. Who was I kidding? I had nearly married a man who thought I was someone else. He wouldn't have even known his own wife's real name.
Dahlia, I'm sorry you're here.
Tess's wide, innocent eyes blinked rapidly.
Korth misses you.
My smile was strained. You're sweet, Tess, but I promise he's better off without me.
But I thought you loved him.
I do. But sometimes that means knowing that you want something more for the person you love. I licked my chapped lips. Is he marrying Odette? Her gaze dropping was all the answer I needed. The force of the realization impaled me, skewering my heart so that physical pain tore at my chest. Korth really had been in love with my title after all.
Their wedding is tomorrow.
I cast about for a change in topic. What are you doing here?
I'm teaching Peter to read.
My eyes darted to glare at the red-headed teenager, who coyly saluted with 2 fingers. I knew the danger of someone trying to get close to someone in power all too well. Tess was far too young for nonsense like that. Tess, that isn't a good idea.
We're friends, aren't we?
She turned her head to Peter, who nodded fervently.
Korth said that we all learn from our mistakes. Besides, if I didn't visit him, Korth said Peter would be alone all the time. So I'm his friend now.
I jumped to my feet. Tess, you can't. She squared her shoulders, a stubborn expression on her young face.
I can be friends with whomever I want, and he's here because of me. You told me that it's wrong to make someone suffer, so I want to make sure he's comfortable.
He's a prisoner.
Korth made sure to send you a pillow and blankets so you were comfortable.
I stared back at the bedding that had been delivered. It had been Korth's doing? A red-hot pang of guilt ripped through my chest. Of course it had been Korth. Sweet Korth, who had been kind and trusting and was every inch the polite prince he was born to be. Naturally, he would send bedding to ensure the comfort of any prisoner, even if it was the woman who'd intentionally toyed with his affections. Then, of course, his sister would see his kindness and imitate it. But I couldn't let Peter Pan weasel his way into a friendship with Tess the way I'd weaseled my way into getting Korth to fall for me and the way Odette had manipulated Curdy. Tess, I know you're trying to be nice, but you can't trust criminals. They will lie to your face and tell you whatever you want to hear in order to get what they want. Leave Peter to rot. He deserves it. Thanks. I appreciate the love. Peter drawled sarcastically. Tess looked shocked.
I can't do that. Everyone deserves a second chance.
No, we don't. I consciously made my decisions knowing that they were wrong, but I did it anyway.
But you learned from it, didn't you?
Tess's eyes were wide.
You wouldn't do it again, right?
I sighed. You're too young to understand, Tess. But yes, I would do it again. I had my reasons. I'm just sorry that Korth got mixed up in it.
What reasons?
She asked.
You said you loved Korth, so that should be enough.
The void in my chest expanded. Love doesn't overthrow governments. Hate does, and it's stronger than love. And you may not understand it, but the government in Ibora is corrupt. We need to change it, but some things can't be altered unless we use anger and hate as our tools. I think you're wrong, Peter chimed in. Of course you do, I huffed. I didn't need advice from a child, mastermind criminal or not.
Why do you think she's wrong?
Tess asked him curiously. Love can inspire crime just as easily as hatred. She claims that she was only using anger and hate as tools, and that it's stronger than love. But it was the love of her people that drove her actions, not pure hatred of her government. So really, any criminal's actions could be warranted if they love a cause enough. Even a friendship like we have. He smiled at Tess, who beamed back.
I see your point. You're very smart,
Tess told him, and alarm bells clanged wildly in my head once more. She doesn't need your golden tongue filling her head with lies, I snarled. Peter raised his eyebrows in amusement. Tess is smart enough to distinguish truth from lies. Or are you calling her stupid? Tess's eyes snapped to mine. No, I'm not. I'm saying... I sat down heavily and buried my eyes against the heels of my hands. I'm saying you can't trust anyone. Ever. That's all. You don't even need to trust me when I'm behind bars, Peter told Tess. But I'm glad I can trust you. She perked up.
I brought you the reed pipes you asked for before. How good are you at them?
Listen and see, he told her. After a few experimental notes, he began blowing into the reed pipes. The tune wasn't particularly melodious, but nevertheless, I found myself drawn into the music, absorbed to the point where I could forget everything. I allowed myself to drift off to sleep, eager to embrace the darkness of slumber, where I would have an escape from the cyclical thoughts racing around my head. I wanted to dream and remember Korth, not stay awake with the knowledge that he would never be in my future. Chapter 27. A cheer went up from outside. Unable to stop myself, I stood on the wooden bunk and peered up at the grassy field just beyond my cell, holding tightly to the bars as I rose onto my tiptoes. Chairs were set up in neat rows, all decked with roses and garlands of ivy. Women in swishing, pastel-colored dresses milled about, while men in pressed pants and overly shined shoes roamed around the full skirts. Lively conversation interspersed with bursts of laughter assaulted my brain like a battering ram. How could anyone feel any semblance of happiness when my own heart felt so shriveled and empty? An orchestra wound up, and the feet that were just barely visible began moving toward their seats. The wedding was starting, and I was to have no part of it. I slumped back down to my bunk and curled into a ball, back to the cell door so no guards would see the tears I knew would come. Buzzing like a swarm of angry bees filled the air. It swirled meaninglessly around me, and I couldn't work up the mental energy to determine if it was a noise coming from outside or was a concoction of my own mind as I slowly deteriorated into madness. Korth and Odette would become husband and wife, and I was alone, forgotten and imprisoned, as I lived out the short remainder of my life in this rodent-infested cell until I hung for my crimes. Hot tears filled my eyes and began to fall faster than the water dripping into puddles from the ceiling above. Sobs racked my body.
Dahlia.
Korth's hoarse voice came from just outside my cell. His voice was the only sound powerful enough to compel me to sit up and turn around. My heart threatened to emerge from my throat just at the sight of his face. What are you doing here? I choked, hastily trying to wipe away my tears. Your wedding. Korth looked just like how I felt, utterly miserable. His bridegroom's suit of purest white trimmed with gold made him glow in the dim interior of the dungeon. The torches set into the brackets cast a flickering light over his face, giving his eyes a sunken, haunted expression as he stared at my dismal surroundings.
I had to see you.
I stretched my arms wide. Now you've seen me, I said dully. My eyes were puffy and red from crying, my nose dripped, and my hair was matted and uncombed. The state of my clothing was deplorable. There was no mistaking me for a princess. I had nothing to conceal anymore. Korth's gaze switched from my face to my shoulder.
Were those scars on your back?
Absently, I reached a hand over my shoulder to trace along one of the scars that had been visible while my back was to the cell door. All the gowns I'd worn while masquerading as a princess had covered them, but this one had a tear down the back that exposed them. Courtesy of the real Princess Odette. We stared at each other through the bars. I wanted to look away. I wanted to hide my face from Korth so he wouldn't remember me this way, but I couldn't. The longer we looked at each other, the more intensely I tried to memorize every one of his features, never to be forgotten. Soon, he would leave and start his new life with a wife who wasn't me. My stomach churned as I thought of him and Odette together, whispering intimately and swinging hands as they walked along the beach, perhaps even kissing at the top of each bridge they crossed. They would have children together, and laugh about the foolish handmaiden who had failed to steal the true princess's place.
Why did you lie to me?
Korth burst out.
If you had told me, I would have helped. I could have—
But you wouldn't have, I contradicted him. If I'd come to you that first day and told you that I had replaced your true fiancé and was planning a coup to overthrow her corrupt father, you'd have had me imprisoned right away. I gazed around at my cell's tiny interior. I knew exactly what would happen if I told you. And I was right. Korth winced.
On the bridge that night, we promised we'd never hurt each other.
Tears welled in my eyes. I told you that I never wanted to hurt you. And that's true. But I never promised that I wouldn't. I hung my head in shame. I knew what I had to do. People's lives, their liberty and agency, they were depending on me. I couldn't be selfish, as much as I wanted to be.
Dahlia, did you—
Korth broke off and pressed his dark head against the bars of my cell door, teeth gritted. Ask me, Korth. I won't lie to you. I raised my shoulders in defeat. The least I could do was give him the truth that I had withheld for so long.
Was everything a lie? Did you ever love me?
Korth's voice was strangled. I crossed the length of my cell and gently placed my hand over his, a last touch to remember him by. That part wasn't a lie, I whispered. I love you more than you know. Korth gripped my fingers with his own, his forehead still leaned against the bars.
I loved you too, Dahlia. But—
I know. The ghost of a smile flickered across my face as I let my tears fall thick and fast, noting the past tense when he said that he'd loved me. I wasn't worthy of his love anymore. I had been right. Unconditional love was nothing more than a fairy tale. You deserve better than a traitorous imposter. I wanted you to be happy, even if it isn't with me. My voice caught on the words and exited as a croak. I gulped for air. Don't marry Odette, I whispered. She will make you miserable. And I really do want you to be happy.
Dahlia,
he groaned and raised his eyes to meet mine. He looked every bit as conflicted as I felt.
I fear I'll never be happy without you in my life.
A slight scuffling sound made both of us look around. Peter Pan was perched on his bed, chin cupped in his hands, as he stared unabashedly at us, each one of his teeth visible as he grinned. Don't stop on my account. This is the best entertainment I've had since arriving on this island. Go on then, Korth. You said you'll never be happy without the girl who seduced you with the intention of betraying you and attempting to start a war. This is good." He flurried his hand as if signaling for an actor to continue a scene after a missed line.
"Shut up, Pan,"
Korth snapped.
"It's only because of my sister's poor judgment that you're even alive."
I thanked her for her excellent judgment.
"And I'll thank you for not butting into private conversations,"
Korth retorted. He looked back at me.
"Dahlia, why would you do this? Was everything Odette said true? What made you—"
"I've been a part of this rebellion my entire life," I confessed. "The last 3 generations of my family have worked to secure me a position close to the royal family. We wanted them surrounded by those loyal to the rebellion before we acted. And when you asked Odette to come here, we felt like it was the perfect timing."
"She told me you handed her guards over to pirates."
"That's true. I headed the mutiny en route from Ibora. You must understand, I had to." Korth slowly shook his head.
"But that is wrong. Mutiny, treason, those are crimes punishable by death."
"I know." I clutched at the bars. "But what's wrong is how Odette and her father were treating the people. Not all leaders share your honesty and compassion, and their power has corrupted them. All the people in Ibora have been oppressed for years. You said you saw my scars, but those are nothing compared to what others have endured. We had to do something. Odette and Raquel treated us brutally, and I won't stand by and let that happen. I'd rather die from trying to do what I feel is right than stand idly by and watch injustices happen." Korth buried his face into his hands.
"I thought everything was so black and white. I can't condone what you did."
"I know you can't. But believe me, I never wanted to see anyone get hurt. In fact, it was my desire to protect the people in my kingdom that motivated my decisions. If I was fighting for a noble goal, doesn't that outweigh some of the less honorable means it took to achieve it? Turning a blind eye to those who are mistreated and enslaved isn't an option for me. If the right course means doing nothing to stop abuse as long as it didn't affect me, then I don't want to do what is right. Do you?"
"I don't know,"
Korth lamented, clutching at his hair.
"I don't know what's right anymore."
"That's odd," piped up Peter. "You certainly claim to have a firm grasp on right and wrong at my preliminary hearings. I suppose if I'm not an attractive woman, I can't sway your ethics the same way she can." In an uncharacteristically aggressive move, Korth kicked at the iron bars on Pan's cell.
"I don't care how much my sister advocates for you. One more word and you're going back to solitary confinement for the rest of your miserable life."
Peter fell silent, but still watched us so closely that it seemed like he could see right into my soul, a smirk playing across his face the whole time. "I know you want to follow the rules, Korth," I said quietly. "But if you never deviate from the rules, and by doing so allow people to suffer, what has truly been gained? If tyrants go about unchecked and abuse those who are innocent, how is that just? You want to follow rules, but their rules are wrong."
"There has to be another way,"
Korth groaned.
I could sign a treaty with Ibora like Treva did with the Sirens."
"You really think that a simple treaty will cause King Raquel to free all those he has enslaved? He has all the power in Ibora. All of it. No one can challenge him. People can't even feed their families without begging for aid, and everyone else is in the same situation and can't give the help that they so desperately need. We don't need a treaty. We need an army. We need to be liberated."
"You want me to start an unprovoked war,"
he said slowly. "Is it unprovoked, though? Or is it simply that you personally haven't been provoked? Raquel is more than happy to work with you because you can benefit him. If you want the measure of a man, don't look at how he treats his equals or superiors. How he treats his inferiors is a far more accurate assessment. You entering the war is better than allowing Raquel to continue the abuse he is doling out. And if you remember, I fully intended to start the war. I intentionally manipulated you into thinking that the king needed reinforcements so that you would send troops to dethrone who you thought was an imposter. Korth slowly shook his head.
I don't know what to do. I don't want to fight against you.
I know you don't want to fight against me, but will you fight for me? You're about to marry Odette and condemn all of us commoners to a lifetime of servitude and poverty. He didn't answer. From down the hall, one of the guards called,
Your Highness?
I lowered my voice and spoke in a rush. Korth, I know how much you love your people. Every kingdom should have a ruler like you, but they don't. I've told you before, not everyone is as honorable as you are. That's why we need people like you to fight for those who can't fight for themselves.
Prince Korth, everyone is waiting for you.
The footsteps drew nearer. I allowed my fingers to slowly fall away from where they had wrapped around his on the bars. You have all the power now. What you do with it is entirely up to you.
Your Highness?
The guards would round the bend any second. He looked desperately at me.
Dahlia, do you think what you did was right?
I drew a deep breath, willing myself not to cry. Yes and no. But I was fighting for what I believe in, and I will never regret that. If I die, at least I'll die knowing that I did everything I could to help others. And that's enough for me. I don't want to be a coward who's too afraid to take a stand against injustice. The guards clanked into sight, swords bumping against their thighs as they approached.
Prince Korth?
A beefy guard with a bushy handlebar mustache said tentatively.
Everyone is waiting. We can't delay any longer. Princess Odette insists.
Goodbye, I whispered, shrinking back into the shadows at the back of my cell. After a final look back at me, Korth allowed himself to be led away, back toward his wedding.